Hello everyone. Welcome to Woolen Spinning. My name is Rachel. This is episode 298. I can't believe that the first episode in October will be episode 300. It is just mind-blowing. How are you all? It is September 3rd, 2024, and in Canada, this is the first day of a new year. And the reason for that is that sort of Labor Day weekend, which is the first weekend in September every year, the Monday is Labor Day. It's a statutory holiday, same as in other countries. I know Britain, other countries celebrate Labor Day. Everybody goes back to school on September 3rd. So universities, high schools, elementary schools, preschools, and I know in other parts of the country, like there's parts of Alberta, parts of Ontario, where they go back the last week of August, or administration will go back, or teachers will go back. But for the most part, the first Tuesday in September across Canada is sort of like the new year. It's kind of a cultural thing, and they've talked about it extensively on like CBC, which is our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, our radios, TV. It always comes up every year that in Canada we've got this sort of sense of a new year on the first Tuesday of every September. So Happy New Year. And it's just because all those schools are back. I hope everybody is well. I am having some issues with my voice. I'm hoping that it'll sort of carry us through the show. I'm going to take it a little bit easy, speak a little bit softer than I normally do, because I do tend to project for the microphone. If you need to turn me up a little bit, please do so. I am going to see the doctor on Thursday about it, just to make sure there isn't anything going on. And so wish me luck, and I'll just we'll see how it holds up throughout the show. I hope that you guys have been making... I just had a whole bunch of stuff fall off the desk. I'm so sorry. That probably made a big banging sound. I hope you guys have been making a whole bunch of stuff. I have been doing a whole bunch of sampling. And we had talked at the beginning of the summer about me walking you guys through my sampling process, sort of where I go, what are some of the things that I think about, what are some of the... nuances of that sampling process, whether or not I'm sampling to a pattern, whether or not I'm sampling to something that's sort of a little bit more airy-fairy, a little bit more, well, we'll see what happens type sampling, where it's a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more go with the flow rather than sampling to a specific project. And we had talked about sort of working through that process. Thank you, Lisa. And then we kind of never did, because we got sidetracked throughout the summer, and I did show you a lot of samples, and I showed you the sampling for one of the things that I'm working on right now, which is this big combo spin. But then we didn't really go into like lots of depth and lots of detail. So that's what I would like to do today. So we're going to spend some time talking about my finished Jethro. I did show you guys a little bit of it last week, but it is now washed and blocked, and photos are taken. It is done and dusted. So we'll talk about that first. And then we'll go from there in terms of this sampling process that I wanted to share with you guys. So it is so good to have everybody here in chat. Thank you so much for being here. You guys are already trucking along, and I already can't keep up. I want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the bulk of the show. So I think what we'll do is I'll have a sip of water. We'll run the intro credits, and then I will just do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll get into what I wanted to share with you guys today. So I'm actually wearing my Starlight Knitting Society t-shirt today. It's the one with the unicorn on it with the girl knitting. I love this t-shirt and I don't wear it very often because I'm saving it. I don't know what I'm saving it for, but I'm saving it. So I wanted to share that that was what I was wearing today. This is from Portland, Oregon. It's one of the knitting shops in the greater Portland area. And yeah, I don't wear it very often. I absolutely love it. I have another one from them as well. That's the balls of yarn with the straight knitting needles in them with the flowers and crocuses and stuff. And I don't wear that one very often either for the exact same reason, because I'm saving them. They're precious. I love them, and they were super expensive just because of the Canadian dollar, not because they're expensive, and I'm willing to pay for it. It's just that when with the conversion at that time a couple of years ago, they ended up costing a little bit of money. Thank you, Eveline. She says that's such a cute t-shirt. It is. I loved it. Welcome, Paper Knits, for your first live stream. That's really exciting. Welcome. We love having you here. Thank you for joining. So I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping really quickly, because this is a really, really wonderful time in the woolen spinning sort of calendar, if you will, in the grand calendar, to join in and jump in with us on a few things that we're working on. So let's just head over here and I will bring up some of this stuff. So we've had a lot going on this summer, and it's been really, really, really fun. Things are still happening, things are still going on. So let's just run through our last two spin along, make along kind of projects that we've got going on right now. So the first one is our spindle spun season. We call it season so that we can capture the Southern Hemisphere, because of course for them it's the opposite time of year right now. They're going into their spring, we're going into our fall. This will happen until September 22nd, which is the autumnal equinox up here in the Northern Hemisphere, and spring for those in the Southern Hemisphere. And Spindle Spun season happens on the Ravelry group. There's a Spindle Spun season thread to share all of your spindle making, spindle spinning, and then in the Slack channel, hashtag Spindle Spun Summer, Spindle Spun season 2024. It was really interesting a few weeks ago when we were in Knit City, Calgary. Rebecca and I got into a conversation with a couple of people about they're just starting out, they're just learning how to spin, they're just starting to spindle spin. They've got themselves some drop spindles, they're learning on supported spindles, which is amazing. Props to you if you're starting off your spinning journey on supported spindles. You are very talented and very amazing. I couldn't do it. I said to quite a few people, I think by the end of the weekend I had said it about 4 or 5 times, and I'll repeat myself again here because I know I've already said this on the podcast. We are now at the point, after 10 years of running Patreon and running woolen spinning and doing all the things, we are now at the point where it's 6 and 1/2 does the other, whether somebody spindle spins or wheel spins or does both. We have so many spindle spinners in our community that have really celebrated spindles and brought spindles to the forefront and really have made a study of their spindle spun yarns. And we've got people in our community who are teaching spindle spinning. We've got people who are really well known in the spindle spinning community for their contributions to spindle spinning. And we've got people who are working on their spinning certificates, doing it on spindles. So yeah, if you're a spindle spinner and you haven't really found a place for yourself, our community will welcome you with open arms. The other spackle that we've got on, so spackle stands for spin along, knit along, is our emotional chicken spackles. So that is our emotional chickens, which my kids just think are hilarious. They love these things. I don't know if I'm going to get one made. There's a few things going on in my personal life right now that I'm just not sure that I have space to make a chicken, but this will be running also until the autumnal equinox. And I have to admit, you guys, just because of things going on in the background and in my personal life and in our family life, seeing these popping up in the general channel on Slack and seeing them pop up on the Ravelry thread in the Ravelry group has just, every single time I see one, I smile, and it just has made my day. So keep them coming. I've got a few to show you in community participation at the end of the show, and they are just so fun. It's just innocent fun. So keep them coming. They don't have to be hand spun, but if they are, that would be amazing. All right. Our yarn our yarn structure, this is what I was talking about in terms of this is a great time to jump into the community. If you've been on the fence, you're not sure where to join, you're not sure that it's the right time, this is the time to join Wool and Spinning. So this is a great time to jump into our 2-year study of Sarah Anderson's book, Spinner's Book of Yarn Designs. I have my copy right here. I feel like it's attached to me at my hip. I take it with me everywhere right now. And there are several things going on throughout the days, weeks, months in relation to this. And I'll talk about a little bit. We're just jumping into yarn structure. This is part 3 of our study. We've done stunning singles, and then we did back to basics. And oh, that's true, Diane. I keep saying emotional chicken, but it's an emotional support chicken. I know, I always jump. You guys know how bad I am about shortening things. And so for our Spinner's Book of Yarn Design, we've got several places for you to engage. We've got the Wool Circle. If you look on Patreon, there's a 7-day free trial. You can jump in there, see what Rebecca's been doing in terms of sharing her journey. She just finished up the Stunning Singles part 2 of our study. And you can catch a couple of those episodes, catch up on them, see if it's something that would suit you, that you feel like you would want to do. And that streams every other Tuesday to the live stream. And then Spinning Staples is the sort of dedicated book study group. They go deep. They're looking at their own spinning. They're trying to improve their own stuff. They're sort of on their own individual journeys. We've got a couple of people in the chat today that are part of that group. So if you guys want to chime in about what's been valuable about that group, that would be amazing. And then Spinning Pearls drips out throughout the month for all the Patreon subscribers. So I drip that content out to you guys as the month goes out, and it's looking at stuff from previous stuff that we have looked at that directly goes with what we're doing currently with Sarah Anderson's book. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about our yarn structure part 3 in just one moment. So we'll just hold that thought, put a pin in it for just a sec. Queries and Explorations is one of the Patreon groups that also meets twice a month. It's not related to the Sarah Anderson's study or like our study on Sarah Anderson's book. It's not related to any of that, but Queries has been meeting now for almost 5 years. No, we're at the 5-year mark now, I think. And we meet on the 2nd and 4th Saturday. And right now we've been looking at drum carding. So this next Saturday, a week from now, week and a half from now, we're going to be looking at hand cranked drum carders and some tips and tricks. And then we'll move in, when we're ready, we'll move into motorized carders and looking at tips and tricks with those. I always forget to talk about Maker Morning. I don't know why. I always forget it. Maker Morning happens twice a month, usually on Wednesday mornings at 6:30 Pacific. And it's for patrons of the community. We come together and we just spend an hour making together, sharing what we're doing, sharing what we're making, and catching up with one another. We're supposed to have one tomorrow. I have not posted the post and the reminder link and stuff. Google Calendar will probably populate a link for tomorrow morning. I don't know that I'm going to be able to do it because our truck is going in for servicing. And as you guys know, we only have one vehicle right now. So I think it's going to be too tight and we'll have to move it to Thursday morning. But I'll keep you guys posted. Look in Slack. If you don't see a Patreon post, it's because it's not tomorrow morning. And I'll try to keep Slack clear and delete the post if it starts to auto-populate and starts to do things on its own. Because we all know what Google Calendar does. It just constantly is populating stuff that I don't want it to populate. Okay, let's talk briefly about Year of Yarn, our Year of Yarn stuff that's coming up, because our yarn structure, let me just make this a bit smaller for you guys. Our yarn structure stuff is really important because this is going to go on now for the next 6 months. So I do want to spend just a moment talking about it, and just bear with me here. So it's time to dig into a topic that many of us have been waiting for, ply structures. We will actually spend the next 6 months talking about ply structures, and this syllabus will cover the first half. So Rebecca and I have made the next syllabus. I am linking it in the live chat for you guys now. Whenever ply structure comes up, a side issue is the use of these yarns in socks. Socks are the ultimate durability test, and ply structure is a major variable in a yarn's durability. Sarah discusses this in her book, so we will spend some time discussing socks as well. However, you get to choose the best way for you to sample for your study. Think about what weight and quantity of yarn is right for you to get through the number of samples you want to try. And if you wish to spin a number of small samples, because we're looking at hauser, cabled, opposing ply, chain ply, what else are we going to be looking at? Crepe. There's a whole bunch of yarn structures that we're going to be looking at. So if you want to spin a number of small samples, maybe 15 to 30 grams of a worsted weight, that might be more sustainable for you. So figure out what that might look like for you, whether you're going to do some fingering weight samples with the idea of maybe doing some socks eventually, picking one or two of the structures to focus on, honing in on those and doing bigger spins, or maybe some smaller ones that are a little bit thicker that you can really see what's going on in the yarn. When yarn is a bit thicker, you don't need as much twist to hold everything together. You can see the cables popping into each other a little bit better. And you can really see when you look at the yarn what's really happening. So stay tuned. We will be applying these learnings to socks in early 2025 with something very, very special. So a little teaser there for you guys, and that's what's coming up. So now is a great time to jump in if you have been sort of on the sidelines watching us and trying to figure out where's a good entry point. Now is the time. Finally, if you're part of the Slack channel, the spinning Zoom groups that come up throughout the week. If you see a Zoom link and you are in the Slack channel under #general, you are welcome to join. Spin group meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Fiber prep and weaving group alternate with each other on Friday mornings. And book club, they're just in the process of picking a new book. So I will keep you posted about what we're doing next. But people have been continuing to populate books in the #books channel on Slack, and Becca's been cataloging them all like she always does. All right, let me have a look at all the things I'm supposed to talk about today and then make sure that I captured it all, and then we're going to move on. So the last thing that I wanted to mention, I'm really excited about these. So for our Tour de Fleece, there was a couple of prizes for Ellen and Dania. I was going to make some bats for them, and so I pulled out my motorized carder and I got a couple of bats done. So these massive puppies, they're each 100 grams. Are going out to Dania, and one of them is going to Dania and one of them is going to Ellen. They are Suffolk, 70 grams of Suffolk, 28 grams of sort of mixed wool. There's like silk and oil in there and some sparkle and some wool, different colors, 6 grams of Rami and 6 grams of sea cell. So a little bit over 100 grams, about 100 and, I guess it ended up being about 110 grams. And so there are 2 of these puppies here for each of you. And I will be popping those in the mail this week. I also have some stuff to mail out to Ontario to a friend of mine, so I thought I'll do it all at once and get that stuff out to you guys hopefully this week before I leave for the Sunshine Coast, because I'm going to be teaching this weekend at Fiber Camp. Me and Diana are going to be going together. I'm teaching this weekend at Fiber Camp. I can't wait to see Glenda as well. And yeah, so I'm hoping to get those in the mail this week. If not, you guys, I'll be popping it in early next week. All right, let's talk about finished objects, finished knitted objects. I have, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right here. I just realized the music doesn't play for that one, so I'm going to have to fix it. I am really, really excited to share this one with you. So this cardigan started off, so it's this in the background here on my, my left-hand side. This project started off with a whole bunch of the Sheep Breeds kit spins that were left over from when I did the Spinning Sheep Breeds workshop on the School of Sweet Georgia. So I had all of these spins that I had prepped for and spun, and all these different fibers and all these different sort of 2-ounce skeins of wool that were sort of left over from that project. But for the most part, they were like partial skeins. So there had been 2 ounces for each breed. But then what was left over was sort of bits and pieces, because I did all of that dyeing. So I took all of these and I did all of that color wheel dyeing that we explored back earlier in the summer. And what ended up happening was I sort of had these partial skeins and these all these different breeds, but the reason why they worked so well together was because they were they were all natural shades. So nothing was dyed. Everything was a natural shade. And what's ended up happening is this cardigan's ended up being kind of a memory cardigan for me. So I asked Mike to take some photos yesterday, and I did a few things differently from the pattern. So I was just going to talk about some of my modifications here really quickly, just so that I sort of could share with you guys. I didn't follow the pattern very closely, and there was a few things that I probably should have paid more attention to. So there's supposed to be a row, because I didn't follow it like for sure. I think what I would do differently next time is I would actually include another row. If you can see under my arm there, you have the rows of granny squares going up the front and the back that makes the drop shoulder. And I think if I were doing this again, I saw a couple at Knit City that were like this, because Knit City Calgary was a sea of Jethros. Like, talk about the sweater to have made to wear. It was Jethro. A lot of people had added an extra row under the arm of squares. So they had sort of a partial row that was only the lower half of the cardigan that was under the arm. And I think just to give you a little bit more positive ease and to make it a little bit baggier, to make it sort of more of like a box feel, you know, baggy, drop sleeved kind of cardigan, it would move the drop sleeve down further onto your arm as well, because you're adding a little bit of width. I think I would do that next time. I would add a row of granny squares under the arm. It means more granny squares. I think I would have ended up needing another 10. And it would make it a little bit baggier and it would make it a little bit bigger. But I think in the end, I think that would have worked really super well. The other thing that I did differently that I didn't follow the pattern for was I did my own thing for the sleeves. One of the things that I really like about some of the newer sweaters that are being designed and being released is these slightly baggier, bigger sleeves. I like the look of it. It's comfortable. There's that positive ease. You can move it around. You can push it up, because the cuff, if you can see at the end of my hand there, at the end of my arm, is still cinched in a little bit. Not as tight as on the Snow Crocus. And if you guys remember that project, I wonder if I can pull it up really quick. That has the cable, it's that the yellow cabled all over cable. It's by Midori House. It's got that cable running down the arm, and then around sort of the mid forearm, you change needle sizes and you decrease a whole bunch, and you cinch in the sleeve so that it's really, really super tight. So I don't know if you guys can see this. Let me just zoom in. I used to do this all the time on the podcast, and I know it used to drive people crazy. But the sleeve comes down, and then you've got all this ribbing down here that's meant to be really super tight. I've ended up really not liking that, and it's too tight, it's too long. The tubular bind off is a little bit too tight. It just, the whole thing didn't really work for me. I probably will rip it out at some point and redo it, but so I took that learning, and for these sleeves I knit straight. I did do some decreases down the back of the sleeve, down the where the seam would be, just because they were a little bit too baggy and a little bit too big. So where I picked up around the drop shoulder, I knit straight for about 4 inches, and then I put a decrease every sort of 12 or 14 rows for about 4 decreases. So I decreased about 8 stitches. And then when I got down to the end of the cuff, I knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1 all the way around. And I ended up just by happenstance with a number of stitches that was divisible by 4, which meant my 2x2 ribbing, knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, worked out around the cuff. That was just complete. I lucked out. And so what it ended up doing was creating sort of a bit of a bell-shaped sleeve, and giving me a little bit of increased ease through the sleeve. It makes them really super comfortable. I kept trying the sweater on to make sure that the sleeves didn't end up being too long. One of the things that I have often found with drop sleeves in the past is I've ended up with sleeves that are either too short or too long. So I learned from my sort of mistakes, if you will, and they're not really mistakes, but previous experience, and I just kept trying on the cardigan again and again and again until I sort of had a length that I really liked, and then I knit the ribbing until I had a length that I liked. So I think I ended up with just over 2 inches, almost 2.5 inches of ribbing at the cuff. So didn't read the pattern at all. That might be totally how the pattern is written. I don't think so though, but I didn't look at the pattern. And this was how I did my sleeves. The other thing that I really, really liked was when I was laying out my squares, to jumble them up and mix them up as much as possible. I took all of the squares that had the same center and I made a pile. And so I ended up with 7 or 8 different piles with different centers. So I had all of my white centers that were merino together. I had all my Cheviot centers that were sort of a creamy white all together, and so on. And then when I was laying out the cardigan, I laid it out from the lower front hem all the way to the back hem. So you're sort of, what you're doing is you're looking at the front of the cardigan as well as the back of the cardigan, laying out flat. So before you seam it. And so you're looking at it as sort of a one-dimensional flat piece of fabric. And that gave me an opportunity to make, and then when I went to lay out all the squares, I went from the first pile, second pile, third pile, fourth pile, and all the way, and kept building the cardigan that way in these big long lengths of squares. What that really helped me do, and it's a trick that my mom had taught me from quilting, it just helps to jumble things up as much as possible. So in a kind of a controlled way, you end up with all of your centers spread out. And then from there, I would move things around depending on what was touching. So if there was 3 or 4 with a gray outside that were touching, that were the same wool, I would just flip them with another one that had the same center. It sounds really technical and it sounds really complicated, but it was actually really easy, and it limited moving squares around like a crazy person until you just don't even know where to move them anymore because there's nowhere to move them to. The other thing that I worked really hard to do, and it didn't really work on the back here, if you can see there's 2 squares that ended up kitty corner to each other, diagonal to each other, that are both solids. That wasn't intentional. I tried to keep those as spread out as possible, but that's okay. I did also try to keep the black Frisian. You can see it there in the middle, and there's another square sort of second from the bottom, and then there's one that's got the center that's the black Frisian. I tried to spread those out as much as possible because they really make the sweater pop, because it gives you that depth and that darkness as well as the lightness from the stark white merino. I tried to keep those as separate as possible. So I would move them around. And you can only do what you can do. That's the hardest part. Diana's nailed it. The hardest part, getting random squares to look random. Because if you start to manipulate them too much and you move them too much, they start to look like they were placed in a pattern. So you kind of want these areas that it's like, oh yeah, they ended up together, and oh yeah, they're kind of in the same row, and oh yeah, because when you're walking around and moving, you can't tell. Nobody except for us is going to see that kind of stuff. So I did, actually, Christine. She says, I hope you remember to take a photo of the layout once you decided. I did. I took several photos, actually, and I left it laid out on the floor as I was connecting them. So I used a join as you go method as part of the pattern. She links to a YouTube tutorial, and I used that tutorial to crochet these all together, and I kept them laid out on a mat in our I think it was in our living room, actually. Yeah, I had them on one of our rugs, and I just asked everybody to stay away. Please don't touch them until it's done. So that is that's my Jethro. I am so tempted to make this again. And I'll just catch up on some of the questions as the photos cycle through. It's funny, Fionn says, I never wanted to learn to crochet until this cardigan. I kind of felt the same way. So when I follow Tanis on social media and stuff, and partially because she's a Canadian dyer, and I've actually met her in Ontario when I've been in the Purple Pearl. And when she published this pattern, it was the first time that I was like, oh, I really want to learn how to do this. And I knew how to make granny squares. They're not difficult. But I did want to use my Handspun. I really wanted to bust through a whole bunch of stash. That's one thing that this was a little bit disappointing for. It didn't use as much yarn as I had hoped. And I used a 3.5 millimeter or an E hook. And I probably could have even gone down to a 3mm hook or a 3.25mm hook, because there are areas of the sweater that ended up a little bit stretched out just because the crocheted fabric could have been a little bit tighter. Let me see. I'm just catching up on chat here. Yeah, I agree, Eve. She says, I think I'd do granny square sampler squares instead of all the same ones. That's what I would do next time. I wouldn't necessarily do the same square over and over and over again. About halfway through, it got really tedious. And I think if I were to do this again, I would maybe choose 3 or 5 different patterns of granny squares that would all end up with the same size square. My squares came out at about 3.75 inches or 9.5 centimeters square. And if you know what size you're working to, I think I would do more of like a sampler next time. Because yeah, about halfway through it was sort of like, oh goodness gracious, I still have to make like 25 of these things. Yeah, so Tori was asking, did you play around much with the gauge because of the different wool types per square? So no, I used the same hook the whole time, and the yarn was all pretty much the same gauge. The one yarn that was different, actually, funnily enough, was the merino. It was quite a bit thicker, and I don't think I have any. Yeah, so the merino is the one that's pictured there just under my arm, the solid white block there. That was 100% merino, that particular block, and it came out thicker, and that square is bouncy and springy, and it's got good bulk. When you squeeze it down, it pops right back up. In some ways, that one was crocheted to the exact right gauge, even though at the time it felt a tiny bit thick. The other ones could have been tightened up a little bit and crocheted on slightly smaller needles. A couple of the yarns that I used were definitely a little bit finer, but they were all sort of in the 14 wraps per inch range, sort of that heavy fingering light sport. The other thing is they were all spun at the same time. So because they were all spun over the same period of time, I did them all on the podcast actually. We did them as we worked through the sampler pack, show after show after show for a short period of time. I think it was over like 3 months or 4 months. And I think that really helped to keep all of the yarns quite uniform. So they were all spun very, very similarly. They all felt very, very similar. You can see here this square that's right down here below me. The center is some Romney Tussa silk that was from my stash. That wasn't from the sampler pack, but that's the center. And then the next row is the 100% merino. The next row is Shetland, and then the final row is gray Suffolk. All 4 of the yarns worked together because they were all spun sort of to the same weight. But like I said, I could have gone down another 0.5 millimeter, and I probably would have had really good success with that as well. There's 1 or 2 squares on the finished sweater. This one actually is one of them that's stretched out a little bit, and it's just because, again, they could have been crocheted a little bit tighter. Let me see. Yeah, Diane says controlled random. Exactly. Let me see. I think that answered those questions. And then, yeah, the other thing that I would, that I was going to look at too, when somebody had a question about the underarm. A small vertical row under the armpit. So let me go to the big camera for just a minute. I'll show you guys what I did in lieu of the actual added row under the underarm. So I knew that I didn't have the added squares, like, because I'd already started to crochet it together. So if I were to do this again, I would add a row in here of actual squares. So I would add another 4.5 squares here. I'm not sure how I would do that, but I'd probably have to go down to here and make the arm sky a little bit bigger even, so it would be even a little bit baggier. If you brought your gauge down and you had smaller hooks, use smaller hooks, it wouldn't matter so much because the squares would be a little bit smaller, so your arm sky wouldn't grow so much. So I think I would be a little bit more thorough about making sure that I was swatching and how big my squares are and how many squares I want up here to make the drop shoulder, to make sure that 2 full squares is the depth of the armhole that I want. And then I would add 5 more squares, a row of 5 under here. So this would come down to here instead. And this would be smaller, like just think smaller gauge, tighter, smaller. But I think I would add another gauge row under here. So what I did instead, let me just hold that out of the way. When I crocheted, when I did the join as you go method, what I did was I worked all the way up, all the way, and then did the same on the other side, and then all the way down to connect everything. So these 2 were still separate. This wasn't connected yet. And so I added another row to connect these 2 up to halfway up that square to get the right depth for the arm sky that I wanted. And so that added that little bit of width in here that I wanted. But again, I think I would have added a whole other row of squares. If you're not following and it sounds overly complicated, this is some of the fit stuff and some of the sweaters fit stuff that over the years I've sort of started to hone in on, like, oh yeah, that would have been a little bit better, and oh, I could have changed this and done this. So that's why we discuss it here. For those who are ready for some of those discussions, then we have them. And for those who aren't, come back later when you're ready, you know, and sort of skip over that. So it's not urgent. Oh, great question actually, Eve. So how urgent is it that your squares are exactly the same size? Mine weren't exactly the same size. So some of the yarns that were a bit finer, like this one here, this is that Romney Tussa Silk. It was a little bit bigger. The merino, sorry, it was a little bit smaller. The merino one that was 100% merino, this one was a little bit bigger. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal, because when you go to sew them all together and you go to crochet them all together, all of this outside Patagonia wool was, when you go to connect it, it kind of helps everything to balance out and even out. So I hope that answers that question. I mean, you could do a row of half-size squares, but I think that would get really fiddly. I think I would rather make it so that the depth of 2 squares joined is the right depth of the arm sky that I want. I think that's what I would do next time. So I would make my squares a little bit smaller and make more of them. I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole the other night, and I was looking at micro crochet. So it's done on 0.5 millimeter and smaller hooks. So one girl was using, or I assume it was a woman, one person was using 0.3 millimeters and another person was using 0.4 millimeter hooks, and they were all working with sewing thread. And the one person had crocheted enough little granny squares for a 1,300 square blanket. And I was like, why would you do it out of sewing thread? Like, it's not even gonna be warm. But then I was like, no, it's probably like just the idea of doing it. But her little squares they were 1 inch square. And I was like, I'll take my big bulky woolly squares any day. I don't care if they're even a little bit smaller, but not 1 inch square and 1,300 of them. I was like, that's too hardcore for me. Way too hardcore. And it was so much fun to watch some of the reels that they had made and done. It was so fun. All right, so that's my Jethro. Thank you for letting me wax poetic about it. I really appreciate that, you guys. All right, let's go into sampling. I think that is a really wonderful sort of segue, because the sampling and the spinning is why we're all here. And I'm excited to chat with you guys about this. So let's do the sort of the fiber preppy sampling spinning thing next, and we'll sort of put this all under the heading of spinning, because it's one project, but we're going to talk through quite a few things. That one doesn't sing either, so I'm gonna have to fix them. I have to make a note to myself to make all of these sing again. I don't know why they're not singing. All right, okay. I'm really excited about this project. So this was, let me share with you I thought I had it out, and I guess I was a little bit negligent and I didn't pull it out. So when we were at Knit City, Calgary, me and Rebecca, I got into a whole conversation with my friend Melissa of Melly Knits about cotton. And the reason for that is because I'm in the process of developing a sort of intro to cotton course for the School of Sweet Georgia right now. And it's been a bit of a labor, and it's been a little bit like pulling teeth. And part of that is because there are cotton sources out there for us to spin and for us to spin as hand spinners. But one of the things that seems to come up again and again and again and again, and it's not like something that comes up once or twice, it comes up again and again and again and again. It's one of the things that I get asked about the most, is how do we combine cotton with wool? How do we make cotton wool blends? And so I got into this whole conversation with Melissa at Knit City, Calgary. And her and I have a date to get together and discuss this further, so I will report back. But one of the things that her husband Aaron had created for the show were these cotton wool blends. And so this is, she's called it Breeze, but it's CVM cotton and silk. So this is 70% CVM, 20% organic cotton, and 10% mulberry silk. And you can see this got caught actually on something, so it's a little bit beaten up. But this is the bat. I have 2 of these. Isn't that beautiful? And Aaron had done a purple one where he blended, so the color that comes in this bat is it's from the silk. So this one was sort of a corally color with these hits of sort of turquoise blue that you'll see in the knitted swatches really comes through nicely. And then she had done another couple, he had done another couple that were green. So the sari silk was green. And then he did another one where the silk was purple. And it's funny because Rebecca was really leaning toward the lavender ones and I was leaning toward the green ones, and then I ended up picking the Breeze. And I'm actually tempted to contact Melissa and just send her a text and be like, do you still have those green ones? So the CVM lock that was the original. So for those of you who don't know who Melissa is, Melly Knits, she's been on Woolen Spinning Radio a couple of times now. And oh, just so you guys know, there's no Woolen Spinning Radio for September. The reason is because Rebecca's been traveling, I've been traveling, there's been quite a few things going on. We just didn't get a chance to coordinate to record. So we will probably be having Maxwell Stein. He's on Instagram as Max Will Spin. He's probably going to be our guest for October's show. So we'll start fresh in October and just give ourselves a little bit of a break for September. There's enough going on in September that I had to take something off my plate, and I know you guys understand, so thank you. So this is the CVM lock that comes on the bat that Melissa uses to kind of show people, like, you know, this is what we're starting with, the clean scoured lock. And this is kind of what Melissa is known for. So this was on the other bat that I've already broken down and used, and this is on the other one. So these are the locks from the fleece that she was using for these, that Erin ended up using for these bats. And she goes through sort of the scouring, the washing process with these fleeces, and then she picks them open, and you get this like true woolen prep. She's not trying to create prep on her drum carder that she's not trying to create like really smooth bats where when you pull them off, the fibers almost are kind of worstedy. She picks everything apart, makes it really super disorganized and really super woolen, and feeds them in that way. So you end up with these really airy, bouncy bats. You can find her on Instagram at Melly Knits. If somebody is able, you can link her in the chat right now. Anyhow, she lives locally to me. I've known her for several years. She's an absolute pleasure and joy. She is so full of joy, that woman. You can't help but get excited when you're around her. So we got into this whole conversation about cotton, and it's kind of ended up leading me down this whole rabbit hole a little bit, because I came away from the show wanting to spin and knit for that top called the Oolong Tee who had a sample in the booth that she was wearing on the first day of Knit City Calgary from Horizon Fibers. And so I was looking at her sample and I was looking at her wearing it, and I loved the ease that the sample knitter that had done it for her had done it for. And I kind of came away feeling like I would really like to spin and knit for that. The yarn that was used to make that sample has a really high percentage of alpaca. And I'm touch and go with alpaca. Sometimes I can handle it and sometimes I can't. It really depends on whether or not there's any what's that called? The stuff that's in all of these fibers that we're allergic to. The not the dandruff, but the there's a word I'm looking for. Anyways, sometimes I'm okay and sometimes I'm not okay. So I didn't want to take the chance on a yarn that was so high in alpaca content. And then Melissa and I got into this whole conversation about wool and cotton. Full circle. So one of the things that Melissa said she's had a lot of really good success with blending cotton and wool together is going with wool that's toothier. So I think that's why this blend works. And I think that's why when I started breaking down the bat, I could feel a difference in the CVM is known for just being a wonderful fiber for hand spinners. And it's short for California Variegated Mutant. And it was originally, let me go back here while I'm still on the big camera. It was originally seen as a separate breed from Rommeldale's, and it was considered the colored version of Rommeldale's and was recognized as a separate breed. But now it's all Rommeldale's and California Variegated Mutants, CVM, are recognized as sort of one big breed, and Rommeldale's are considered the non-colored or the white, and the CVMs are considered the colored. So you often get these really beautiful fleeces like this where it's got some sort of gray streaking through it. This one's quite gray, and you'll see in the finished yarn, the sampled yarn that I did, you can see that coming through. The yarn isn't, the base of the yarn isn't white. And so in developing stuff for the cotton course, Melissa and I got into this big conversation. Dander, thank you, Jessie. And it really left me thinking, like, what could I pull out of my stash to put with some different percentages of cotton and see what would work? Because there's lots of people in our community who have tried this, and we always all of us tend to sort of recommend to one another to go with a really fine wool. So go with Cormo, Beaumont, Merino, Rambouillet. And Melissa's saying, no, let's try coarser wools that can actually grab onto the cotton and can actually hold together. So I'm going to do some samples over the next little while, over the next month or so, and I'm going to see what I can come up with, and I'll report back. So in terms of the sampling process, I jumped the gun a little bit too soon by going to this camera, but now we're here, now we're ready. What I did was I took the bat and I opened it up. So this is for people they've maybe got some bats, they're maybe working from bats, they're trying to figure out how to work from bats. This is for you guys. So these particular bats that Melissa had done, or Erin actually did them, her husband, they're 2 layers. So there's actually 2 layers of fiber. So I took the first layer off, and the second layer I just laid on the counter. And when I break bats down, I don't just rip them apart. I don't just grab the fiber and start ripping stuff, because what inevitably ends up happening, even though it's a woolen prep and it's light and it's airy and things are disorganized and blah, 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 I don't want the bat to start falling apart and getting these like wisps of fiber coming off the end that are really disorganized and really sort of start to get like tangled and neppy. And so what I do instead is what you guys just saw, I support the bat as I pull it apart. So I hold my hands together and I support it as I'm pulling it apart. And then with this particular spin, because the locks are a bit longer, these locks are, I'm actually not sure exactly how long they are, but I think they're like 4 inches. Yeah, they're 4 inches. I decided to pre-draft each of these nests out, just like I'm doing here, so that I could stretch the fibers out, sort of realign them a little bit. You guys know that I'm not a true woolen girl at all. I do like more semi-woolen yarns. I like them light and airy. I like a lot of twist in them, but I like things smooth and consistent, and I'm not a great woolen girl. So not 100% woolen. I like woolen preps, and then I like semi-worsted spinning. And so what I did was I just drafted through. The other nice thing about doing this is it continued to help everything to blend together. So I could actually see as I was doing this pre-drafting and attenuating the fibers like this, I could actually see the fibers sort of continuing to blend together. And you can't, it was funny, it's 20% cotton. It's quite a high percentage, but the cotton is just beautifully blended throughout. It's just really, really well done. Okay, so then from there, I started sampling. So I've got all these nests of fiber. I broke down only half of one of the 2 bats. So I've got the 2 layers of fiber. So for those who are new to sampling, I've got, I don't prep all of the fiber all at once, just in case I want to change the prep. Just in case I start spinning and things are not going well, then I haven't prepped the entire thing. So what I did was I took the 2 layers of the bat, I took the first layer off, put it aside. The second layer, I took about 5 or 6 of those strips that I just showed you in the camera, on the video. I take about 4 or 5 of those, I pre-attenuate them. I think I had about 6 of them in the end. And then I go to the wheel and I start spinning. So from there, this is what I'm talking about with semi-worsted spinning. So it's a woolen prep, so it's a semi-woolen yarn, because we classify our yarns based on what the prep is. So we start with our prep, and that's how we determine what type of yarn we're making. Even though I'm spinning in a semi-worsted fashion, it is still a woolen prep. It is still light and airy and disorganized. The fibers are not truly parallel. So the resulting yarns is a semi-woolen yarn. The thing is, and this is where it gets really muddy, I find, and I remember years ago having these discussions with my friend Diana, what I find actually more helpful, and she planted this seed with me years ago, is instead of describing our yarns just purely as, oh, it's a semi-woolen yarn. Instead, I often will say it's a semi-woolen yarn, but I used a semi-worsted draft. Or I used, because some people don't know what continuous back is, some people don't know what continuous forward is, or sorry, short forward. Some people don't know what short backward is. So if you can describe the spinning, then you can help people to understand where you got, how you got the yarn that you got. So in this situation, this is one of those things, Charlotte picked up on this years ago, and kudos to her for seeing it. When I'm spinning like this and I'm going back like this, if you watch my front hand, my thumb is lifting every time I move back, but it is so subtle that it's hard to see. I am not smoothing that fiber. I am not squeezing out the air as I go back. So I'm draft back, move, and this hand is actually lifting off the fiber, even though you can't see that. It's partially because my hand's moving really fast. It's also partially because I'm not like exaggerating by letting go and moving back. I find if I keep my fingers closer to the fiber so I can still feel the fiber, that I can keep my distance of draft more consistent. If I actually physically take my fingers off the yarn, I lose that consistency. It's too many moving parts. My back hand is moving, my front hand is moving, and then I lose that consistency. Does that make sense? So, and then because this is a woolen prep and it's light and it's airy and there's sari silk in there and there's cotton and there's, you know, fiber that's been picked open by hand. When you buy stuff from Millie Knits, that's what you're paying for, is all those hours of hand processed fiber. You know, it's like bats or nests from Katrina, like when you're paying for that time that is spent processing that fiber and prepping that fiber. I'm just going to pause it here for just a sec. So when we're looking at my hands here, the reason why you're seeing some of me going back and double drafting and drafting through some of those thicker spots is because sometimes there's just bits of fibers that come forward that as you're spinning, they don't stretch out and they don't thin out. And so I go back, I fix it, and then I keep going. If you guys have any questions, just ask. Yeah, it would spin well long draw. You could totally long draw this, absolutely. This would also be a really nice one to spin on your support spindles. And then we haven't talked a lot about plying recently. We kind of skip over the plying process. These samples ended up being, I ended up doing a couple of samples actually. before I settled on what I was going to do in the end. So let's just pause this here for just a second, talk through the samples just really, really quick, because I want to slow it down just a little bit. So what I did initially was I spun all those singles, and then I did a bracelet ply where I wrapped yarn around my hand, and it was probably about, I think this is about 2 grams-ish, and I did a 2-ply sample. So this is the 2-ply. Let me see if I can hold on to it here so you guys can see. So this is the 2-ply sample. It's not super, super, super consistent, but what I, because there's like thin spots, and I was just getting to know the fiber. This was the initial sampling that I did when I first sat down to start spinning. Now, because I'm spinning for a specific project and I need a specific yarn weight, so I specifically want a sport weight, 14 wraps per inch, heavy fingering, light sport. The 2-ply just felt, and there is lace in there's kind of lace in the collar section, and then it goes down the center front. I felt like this yarn was just a little bit too thin, and it didn't have enough substance. So I would either have to spin it a little bit thicker with more twist in the singles, because you see how fuzzy it is, and you can't really see the singles. You can't see the 2-ply, each single that makes up the 2-ply. You can't see them. They're not really, really super well defined. They're very woolen looking. You can see some of the places where the sari silk wasn't super blended, and it ended up sort of spinning on its own and color twisting or marling with the underlying yarn. I really like that effect. I think it's really pretty. I'm not sure I would want that like in the middle of, you know, a sweater on a yoke, but I do like the look of it in the sample. But the yarn itself just didn't feel quite substantial enough. So even though 2-ply is really nice because it opens up those yarn overs and it pushes against itself and makes your yarn over is really big and open, I just felt like this wasn't quite sort of robust enough. And so that was why I went and did the 3-ply. So for the 3-ply, this ended up being, there we go. So this ended up being the 3-ply sample. So I started winding yarn onto weaving bobbins to ply from the first spun end. So what I have started doing over the last little while, as you guys are watching me ply here, sometimes with these long spins, it gets laborious, just spinning, 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 spinning. And so what I'll do is I'll spin like 10 or 15 of those nests of fiber, and then I'll wind them onto a weaving bobbin. And then I'll spin another 10 or 15 and I'll weave them onto I'll wind them onto another weaving bobbin. And then I'll spin another 10 or 15 and I'll do them onto another weaving bobbin. And so by the time I've been spinning for a couple of hours, or, you know, 45 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, I've got some stuff stored on weaving bobbins already. I don't try to fill up an entire bobbin anymore and try to like spin through an entire bat or an entire braid. I just start loading my weaving bobbins right away, because then when I look over at what I've already done, it's like, oh man, look at how much look at all this I've filled up. Look at how much I've spun. And I get really excited and I want to keep spinning. It's totally a mind trick. It is completely and totally a mind trick, but it works really, really well. It also means you're constantly emptying your spinning bobbin. And so for me, I have found that actually I can spin longer, more consistently, because my bobbin's not getting really super heavy. I don't have to play around with my break band for my break tension on Scotch tension. I can just spin for a while, unload my bobbin, spin for a while, unload my bobbin. So I finished up this 3-ply sample because I had all my weaving bobbins by then were starting to get full of about 15, maybe 20 grams of fiber each, quite a bit. And I was really sort of at that point, after seeing my 2-ply sample, I was really thinking like, yeah, I'm probably going to end up going with a 3-ply. I probably will find a 4-ply too heavy. This was my little baby sample of 3-ply that I pulled off right away. And immediately I thought, yeah, this has much better roundness. It's much better blended. There's no striping, like there's no bits where the sari silk came through that really kind of, you know, shows up too much. And so from there I thought, okay, 3-ply, this is 14 wraps per inch under a little bit of tension. Remember how we always put our yarn under a little bit of tension, as it would be if we were weaving or knitting. So I put it under a little bit of tension. It's 14 wraps per inch almost exactly. So I was spinning my singles to about 28 wraps per inch. For a 3-ply, we need double the wraps per inch to end up with a yarn that we're happy with. And this is washed and finished. So it's a finished, washed 14 wraps per inch under slight tension. So from there, because I had all of these full by then of all of these singles, this one, this one wasn't done yet. I did this last night while we were watching a movie together as a family. I thought, well, it's probably worthwhile to go all the way through and show you guys what I do from there. So I've looked at my 3-ply, I've looked at my my 2-ply. I know I'm not going to go to a heavier yarn like a 4-ply or a 5-ply. That's not the purpose of this spin and this knit. I know I'm not going to use the 2-ply. I want something a little bit more robust, a little bit rounder. I want something that's going to wear really well, but it's still going to drape, that's going to do really well at this particular knit gauge. It's going to be a little bit bouncier, a little bit more, it's going to have a little bit more lift and loft. It's not going to drape and hang like the original sample, which even in the pattern, she recommends adding some linen, like choosing a linen blend, something with flax in it. I'm not going for that. I'm going for something that's a little bit softer, a little bit lighter, more of like a sweater. I could wear a long sleeve shirt underneath. I could wear it at all different times of the year, etc., etc. So I'm going for something slightly different, something slightly planty. The cotton will give me a little bit of that drape. So I knew the 3-ply is the way to go. These are all the things that I think about when I'm going through this process. So I hope that this is helpful. So from there, I applied a bigger skein. So this is 23 grams. This yarn came out at 1,400 yards per pound. So then I can figure out, do I even have enough fiber for my project? And the answer is yes. If I spin the way I spun, when I finish the other bat and when I finish everything that I've got for fiber, I should have between 650 and 700 yards of yarn, and I need about 600 yards of yarn. So I've got about 100 yards of give or take. So I plied up a bigger sample of 3-ply. I really love this yarn. I think it came out really, really nicely. 3-ply, it's so round. It's just got a lovely, look at the bounce and sprung. That's from the CVM, that bulk where it jumps right back. But it still has it hangs really nicely. And that's from the silk and the cotton. Like it just hangs, oh, and look at the elasticity. If I hold this end here, it's got really nice, but not too much. Not too much. I don't like a lot of elasticity. I don't like it when my yarns are like, boing, boing, like it's just too much. They're really difficult to work with. I find personally, they don't hold their shape really super well in my experience. So from there, you gotta swatch. So it's just a little baby swatch, and if I need to do a bigger one closer to when I go to cast on, I will. But I actually got gauge, so I tend to be a very, very consistent knitter. For whatever reason, my tension, I've never had major tension issues. Usually if I mess up on something that's too big or it's too small, it's a user error. It's my fault. It's not my measurements. So this is on 3.5 millimeter needles. And it gave me a gauge of 24 stitches per inch, which is actually, the pattern is 25 stitches per inch, which is perfect because I am right between sizes. And if I knit the one size that I'm right, like, you know, right below, it'll actually give me the ease that I wanted. So it's actually kind of perfect that my gauge is ever so slightly bigger by 1 stitch over 4 inches. Because when I did the math, it actually works out really, really nicely. And isn't that fabric beautiful? And look at this lovely bias. It's got a bit of drape, a little bit of drape, not a ton, but good. It's good structure. I can't stick my finger through it. It goes right back when you pull on it. It goes right back. It's really, really nice fabric. I really like this. So for those who are kind of new to this process, I do this same process when it comes to fleece, when it comes to braids, wool, that I have to process myself. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. And this is my little card. My spinner's control cards have changed over the years. I used to write different information than I do now. And I thought that I had a photo for you guys of it so that I don't have to sit here and hold it. I think these will cycle through, and I think so that's the finished yarn. That's the photo. There we go. So my control cards have actually changed quite a bit over time. I used to write a lot of information down about like the twist angle, the twist per inch, the number of treadles per 20 inches, where if you sort of measure out a certain distance behind you and you do a certain number of treadles over, drafting over that specific distance, that'll give you a specific twist per inch. And then you can apply to that specific twist per inch. Mabel Ross recommends applying to 2/3 of the twist placed in your single. So if you're, just for round numbers, if you're putting 10 twists, if you've got 10 twists per inch in your yarn, then you should be putting 2/3. So you should be putting 6 twists when you go to ply. I used to go into like all of that. I used to have all of that written down here on my sample card. And I don't anymore. The long and the short of it is I don't anymore. I document whether or not I'm spinning and working to a specific pattern or project, how much yardage I'm going to need, what size I'm looking at, what is the amount of fiber that I'm going to get, that I have, and how much total yardage based on my grist of my initial sample am I going to get. Do I have enough fiber? Do I have give or take 10%? Is there something that I can supplement with if I don't have enough fiber? Can I add stripes? Can I add something I've already spun, etc., etc. I write down where the fiber originally came from, what the percentages are, so that I can recreate that percentage. I have a little book. It's not within distance of reaching, but I have a book that I actually write down all these different blends and all these different percentages of fiber. So if I see something that I really like, I'll write it down and I'll try to recreate it at a later date. I don't even think I've shared that on the podcast before. We should talk about that one day. I share what my initial test gain, what the yardage, because I'm very consistent now just from years of doing this. I write down what my initial grist was, and generally speaking that stays very consistent for the whole project. I write down what wraps per inch I've spun to, and I write down what my final yarn wraps per inch, what I'm aiming for. I also usually put down underneath where the knit swatch is here, I usually put a plyback sample. So I'll do quite a long plyback sample and I'll tuck that underneath. And sometimes that's where I will write my twist angle. The reason for that is that as I'm spinning my singles, as I get further and further into a project, I can do a plyback sample, test my twist angle, make sure I'm on the right track, and keep on going. So that is one thing that I do. The other thing that I wanted to share with you guys, I found these yesterday. I've been doing a big cleanup of the office. It's just a complete mess. Not anymore, because I cleaned it up. But I was doing a big cleanup and getting rid of stuff and recycling stuff and just like really having a good clean out. And I found all of my books that I used to populate. And I've talked about these on the show before. This is a bunch of locks and fleeces that Glenda and I are looking at together. These are all of my samples, not all of them. These are some of my samples that I've done over the years, some of the woven samples that I've done for different stuff. I keep it all in here. This one up top here, that's my toothy, my initial 2-ply toothy sample. And then I have all of these different Ziploc bags that I put in here. This one broke. I'm gonna have to fix that. These are samples that I did for the Weft article for the new Weft magazine that's coming out. And then these are all of my different sample cards. I know some people don't keep this stuff. And I do tend to be a bit of a hoarder when it comes to this kind of stuff. I love documentation. I love books. I like writing stuff down. I love bullet journals. It's a great way of like journaling my life and being able to look back at our year and be like, holy smokes, we did a lot. This is one of my older ones, but for those who are newer to the podcast and haven't seen some of the old episodes, these have really evolved. And so some of this stuff was some of the samples that I did for some of the previous content for like the silk workshop and stuff on the School of Sweet George. And you can see how little I actually wrote. It was more about just keeping samples and keeping these yarns so that I could go back and look at them later, because I can always check the twist angle. I can always look at the twist per inch. I can always calculate that stuff at any time. Usually in the moment, it's about just documenting the yarn itself and keeping copies of the yarn. I keep all of my Long Way Homestead breed stuff. And the other thing that I do, and some of this stuff I think over time I need to clean out because it's stuff that I don't need anymore. This was a big cabled yarn spin that I did years ago that ended up in this. I did keep track of all of the treadles per inch and all of that stuff so that I could end up with a perfect locking link looking cabled yarn. But the other thing that I do, let me see if I can find it, is I also keep business cards. And so I keep all of that so that I always have access to all of that. And going through all of these the other day and finding all of this, yes, it needs to be cleaned out. Yes, there's yarns in there that can be taken out and gotten rid of, and et cetera, et cetera. But I really appreciate how over time you document different things and you need different information. And as you're, as the types of fabrics that you're trying to create and trying to make evolve and change, and the stuff that you want to keep changes, it's nice to have this stuff because it's nice to sort of see where you've been and where you've come from, and where you're going, and to start to formulate a way of being able to keep track of what it is that you're trying to create and what it is that you're trying to make, and where you're going, like what is it that you're trying to accomplish. For me, I get a lot of satisfaction from that, and it'll probably be different for you. So I wanted to share that with you guys because that sampling process we never got to in the summer just because of craziness, and it's fun to talk about. The last thing that I was going to share with you was I did cast something on. So this is Canadian unspun wool, and it is crochet. It is a pain in the butt. Let me show you. So this is the body of the cardigan. So this is the Magnus cardi, and actually I can't remember who it's by. Shoot, I can't remember. But I'll just show this to you quickly. It's just, it's double crochet, and then there's striping with the single crochet. And I'm holding, and you start off with crocheted ribbing, which was really fun to learn how to do. That was really neat. Spoiler, it's single crochet. But what I'm doing is I'm actually holding the green with Brittany of Crux Fibers, her kid mohair silk yarn. So this is Bruise something or other, Bruise, I can't remember what it's called, Bruise something. And so I'm holding that with the green, so it just muddies the green down a little bit and gives you that really lovely kind of, there's that purple in there and the gold, it just gives it that kind of muddy appearance. And then holding it with the green all the way through the body of the cardigan, it's just really, it gives you some fun color effects. And then the whole purpose of making this was to use this one up. So this is the leftovers. I had 1.5 cakes of this left from my Ember pullover that I did several years ago with a hand spun yoke, and I'm holding it with Wood Sprite, kid mohair silk as well. And the brightness of the Sprite really kind of lightens and brightens up the gray Canadian unspun, and it's just fun to work with. The one thing I will say about this cardigan that I don't love, and I'm finding really frustrating, and I am going to shorten the body. It's like a 30-inch body or something like that, and it's just too long for my frame and my shape and stuff. It just make me look really stubby. I don't like stuff that's really super long, so I am going to shorten it. I'm probably going to take 7 or 10 inches off and stop around the 20-inch mark. But you have to cut the yarn every time because you have to attach it to the other end. So both ends, you end up with all of this stuff to weave in. So I've been doing it as I go, so you can see the first half is done, and now I just need to do the next half and then keep going. So that's the only thing about this. There's no way of carrying it up. Oh, thank you, Christine. Megan Balmer. All right. The last thing I wanted to share, and this is still spinning, so I shouldn't have thrown in about the cardigan there because I should have waited and talked about it in a minute. But my Rideau Arcott Charolais blend, so that's this here. I've been slowly processing it and processing the fleece and working my way through my garbage bag full of fleece. I was pulling the locks and pulling some of the tips off. Some of the tips were still sort of sticky, not sticky, they were just stuck together still after washing and re-washing. So I pulled out I got all of this processed. I'm still in the spinning stage. I haven't plied and done some knitted swatches or done anything like what I've done with these projects. And the reason is because I just wanted to get all of the fiber processed first. I just felt like mentally I needed to get that done. You guys can hear I'm losing my voice. We might not get to community participation today. And so I got through all of it, and then I used my new carder. I've got a brand new motorized carder, and I made 3 huge bats, and they were each about 110 grams each-ish, give or take 10 grams. They were all over 100 grams each. And so I had these massive bats, and what I ended up doing was got the bats done, got all the fiber processed, and then I took the bats, I broke them all down, fed them through one last time on my smaller brother drum carder, my hand crank one, and I made all these nests of fibers. So I actually have ended up with all of these nests. It's about 300 grams worth of fiber. I did start spinning them on the weekend to work through the last little bit of it. I've got 300 grams of this spin left, and I've got several weaving bobbins full, just like this, just like my cotton spin that I'm working on right now, full of Charolais, Rideau, Arcott yarn. I'm like, what's that word? Yarn. So this is the last little bit. So I got this all prepped. It's ready to go. I just have to keep spinning. And I have to admit, I have been working on the cotton spin. I can't do both at once. I kind of have to pick where I'm going to spend my time. And because this one isn't time sensitive and doesn't have a deadline, the other one does. I've been working on this, but I've just been doing like 2 or 3 nests a day and then going back to my other stuff. So yeah, this Rideau Arcott Charolais, I love it. It's going to be such a bouncy, springy yarn. And I was torn between a 3-ply and a 4-ply. I definitely want a multi-ply yarn, 3 or more plies. I'm really hoping that I get enough yardage that I can really do. I've got a specific sweater in mind. I've got a specific color in mind that I'd like to dye all of this. And I'm just kind of holding out that I'll have enough yardage. And if not, that's totally fine. I'll figure something else out. But I do kind of in the back of my mind have an idea. That would be really special. All right. Let's do community participation, but we'll kind of blast through it a little bit quickly because I can definitely feel my voice going, and I don't want to strain it because that's what's been going on. So I will see you guys in a minute. All right, super exciting. Now I'm over here. I'm moving all over the place today. All right, so the first thing I want to share with you is our emotional chicken along. I've already talked about this spackle. I really hope you guys are joining in. It's been such a pleasure to watch you guys making these. This is from Linda Sue. Tail feathers are complete, seamed together, working on the body now. Super fun. I can't wait to see this finished. This is from Rebecca. This is Broderick. She's a scientist with a lab researching emotional support. She was named by my kids after some YouTube nonsense. I love it. Beautiful job, Rebecca. And hers is all hand spun. This is from Tessa. Less than a week of knitting and a wild chicken appears. I love the colors that you chose, Tessa. Just awesome. The yarn came from Fiber Scent with my minstrel, and I did some natural dyeing experiments with it last year. So much fun. And it's going to a friend of hers who's starting a new job that she has always dreaded, chair of her academic department in September. She's going to need all the support she can get. Amazing. Thanks, Tessa, for sharing. This is from Christine. I'd forgotten how quick these are to knit. the emotional support chicken. It's one of those I'll just finish this section knits, gusset, comb, and wattle to knit left. So much fun. Spindle spun season, as you guys know, we talked about this as well, but there's some really beautiful spins that you guys have been working on. This is from Sam. Recently needed some samples, needed to make some samples with spinning, with spindle spinning and plying, and grabbed some border lister and fell in love with spinning it on spindles. This fiber was being kept for a morning glory, and so now it's going to be a spindle spun project. It's not about the time it takes, but the time taken, right? Yes, exactly. Eveline says, those chickens are just the silliest. I love it. Yes. This is from Lisa. She finished her pink. Love this. All these beautiful spindles, Lisa. Just gorgeous. This is from Elizabeth. My spindle spun spin is done. Not washed yet, but I love it. I can't believe how well the colors matched up, Elizabeth. So I was wondering if you chain plied this. Beautiful. And fiber prep. You guys are always doing fiber prep now. It is awesome to see. We have really evolved as a community. The amount of fiber prep that goes on in our community now is unbelievable. It's kind of like spindle spinning. There's, for every braid that everybody spins, they're doing fiber prep as well, which is just fantastic, and getting really good quality prep as well. This is from Esther. Just wanted to pop in with some updates on the Jacob fleece. I've been doing a lot of fiber prep and finally got through picking all of this fleece. It's about 1.5 pounds after washing and picking, which gave me about a 75% yield. That's pretty good. The fiber is soft and fluffy. I'm having trouble deciding how to spin the lovely colors. Beautiful. Love this sampling that she's doing there. This is from Hannah. I thought this was a really great question, and a lot of you chimed in the Slack channel and were really, really supportive and kind of gave her some ideas and things to think about. She's been going through her fleece and picking it into locks, which you can see in the cardboard box. So that's up here in the second picture. I'm picking out the VM and the second cuts and then planning to put the locks into single layers in laundry bags for washing. This is taking ages. Am I wasting my time? Should I be teasing the locks apart prior to washing or keeping them together? I've watched lots of YouTube videos, but everyone seems to do it differently, and most of the scouring videos don't seem to show this part. So what I do is I weigh the fleece out into 1 gram parcels. I put them into laundry bags, and that is what gets scoured. I don't go through the process of separating the locks and doing what you're doing. And I think because you've taken the time, care, and attention to do this, I wouldn't then lay them in laundry bags, which they're all just going to get jumbled up anyways. I would do the kitty litter method, which several people linked you to in the Slack channel. And I think it's specifically, if I can find it, it's this method here from the Natural Spinner. So I'm throwing it into chat now. And Linda Sue and several others all said they sort of worked from that method. And have had really good results. But using the kitty litter method, it's where you lay everything out into the tray, you line everything up, and you sink it into the hot water, and then you're able to pull the tray out. And it means that you don't have to touch the locks at all. They stay really, really beautifully organized. If you're going to go to all of this effort to organize them and to get everything lock by lock. So I wouldn't then put them into a laundry bag and they're going to end up all jumbled up. Trust me, I've been there. You're right, Hannah. Everybody does do it differently, and everybody has their own way of doing things. Yeah, I tend to wash fleece pound by pound. So did I say gram by accident? I meant pound, 1 pound. So I would measure this out into 1 pound batches. I think I said 1 gram by accident. I meant 1 pound. And I just put them into linen bags. I put them into buckets, as hot water as I can get, 140 Fahrenheit. And I leave it for 20 minutes with 1 tablespoon of Unicorn Power Scour. I walk away so that I don't keep pushing it and touching it. And then I come back and I do that 2 or 3 times, depending on how clean the fleece comes out. And then I rinse 2 or 3 times. And I just do that over and over and over again. So I hope that's helpful, Hannah. Don't hesitate to ask lots more questions about this. It's a process and it will take you time to figure out what works for you. So anybody watching this that's just dipping their toe into scouring and into washing wool, you know, work with 1 pound increments. It's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit more manageable, and just be really kind with yourself and try not to agitate the wool as much as possible so that you're really successful. Hot water and soap will felt wool, so just be really, really gentle but don't be afraid, because you're not adding cold water. You're sticking with hot, so those scales are going to end up, they're going to stay open, but they're not going to grab onto one another unless you start agitating it and throwing it into cold water. And you know, it actually takes a little bit more effort to felt wool than we think. All right, general makes and shares. This is from Barb. We just wanted to send out a huge congratulations to Barb. She submitted 2 skeins to the Minnesota State Fair and she got first place in the cellulose category for this beautiful hemp yarn, and best in category as well. I spent yesterday demonstrating on a drop spindle through the guild. Well done, Barb. Just so beautiful. This is from Dion. This is her finished cotton wool yarn. So this was an experiment that she did where she had 1 single of wool and 1 single of cotton, spun them separately and then plied them together. And how effective is this yarn? It is just beautiful. Beautiful. Love this. I can't wait to see this into fabric. Eve is asking about the scouring fleece. She says boiling water to supplement tap water, ? I don't, because I get such hot tap water. I get 140 Fahrenheit from my tap water. If you don't get it that hot, then you may have to supplement with boiling water, but I would actually grab a thermometer and check the heat of your water. See how hot it can get. And not... This was a mistake that I made when I was a baby spinner and I was just learning, but I would start running the hot water into my buckets. So the initial hot water that comes out is not hot water, right? It takes time to heat up, and we have a one of those. We don't have a hot water tank. We have the hot water on demand, you know, the electrical setup that heats the pipe and heats the water. So it takes 5 to 10 seconds to get it going. So I used to fill the bucket and I'd get to the top and I'd be like, the water's too hot coming out of the tap to touch. Like it's not next, like it's too hot for my skin. But then I would touch the water that was my scouring water and it wasn't that hot. And it's because the first half was lukewarm at best. So don't make that mistake that I made. Run your water until it's the full heat and then start filling up your buckets. I know it sounds really intuitive and sounds really common sense, but when I was a baby spinner, I just didn't think about it. I was like, hot water is hot water is hot water. Nope, it's not. This is from Kelly, 346 grams of Cheviot kicking around that she had milled in maybe 2020, 2021. Either way, it's about 800 yards, 12 wraps per inch, 2 ply spun long backward. I think she means continuous backward. Beautifully spun, Kelly. Just gorgeous. I can't wait to see what she does with this. This is from Dania, combo spin of 2 braids, Hello Yarn and Bramble Ridge, blended with a mutt bat that she blended from bits from her stash, all protein fiber. I think the mutt was actually gray, if my memory serves, so that's what gives this the yarn the overall feeling of like muted, you know, cloudy skies, gray. It's just so effective. Destined for a couple of different cowls, 3 ply. Beautiful. This is from Kat. I'm always bowled over by anybody who can do gloves. I'm always like, if you are a glove knitter, you're amazing in my book. They still need the ends woven in, but they're finished new gloves, handspun yarn, wool, angora and silk, and then knit. And she had just enough yarn. They are beautiful, Kat. Just gorgeous. And this is from Kathy. I think this is our final one. She's been hooked on art yarns recently. Still so much to learn, but so much fun anyway. The blues are bubble crepe and super coils. You guys know how I feel about super coils. They're my absolute most favorite yarns. I love them. And then both from Course Spun. For my next test, I'll use thinner yarn for the 2 binders for the crepe. I actually think because the The blue core spun was sort of thick and thin, and you've got lots of like really beautiful sort of fibery bubbles, if you will, in your core spun. That slightly thicker binder for the crepe actually works really well. I think it really makes it sing, and you can really see that creped cage effect. It's really, really well done, Kathy. And then the pink and the purples are variations of spiral plied and coiled slub yarns. Also lots of ideas about what to make next time. Gorgeous. Really, really well done, Kathy. I love seeing people playing around with all of these yarns, because these yarns, they're fun to make. And when you come back to your conventional spinning, you'll find that you've improved, even if you weren't looking to, and that wasn't the purpose. Thank you guys for everything that you do, for sharing everything that you do, for being so supportive of one another and helping one another on your fiber arts journey. It's always a pleasure to watch from the outside. You know, often the spotlight in the podcast is on me, but the rest of the time the spotlight gets to be on you guys, and that's really fun for me to watch and to see. I hope you guys have a wonderful couple of weeks. Next Tuesday, same time, same place, we'll be streaming the Wool Circle, and Rebecca will be doing the introduction for the yarn structure for part 3. So definitely check that out. I hope you guys will consider jumping in with us. And until then, happy spinning, happy making. I hope you find joy in your making. And I will keep you guys posted about Maker Morning tomorrow. I will post something tonight in the Slack channel under #general about whether or not I can fit it in tomorrow morning or not. I suspect we're going to have to move it to next week, but I'll navigate that this afternoon. All right, until next time, happy spinning, everyone. Bye.